Y'all, today I've got a spooky show to share with you for this Feet Swap Saturday, but first, I'd like to thank everyone for bearing with us this last week. As some of you may have noticed, we had a full week of reruns due to some regrettable but entirely human circumstances. I was being chased by some sort of demon hitman named Mr. Nolan. I'm just kidding. In reality, though, I am serious about appreciating all of you for listening to the show, and just want to let you know we'll be back to new episodes this week. But in the meantime, we've got a fantastically spooky and entertaining episode for you today from our friends over at The Whispering Woods. It's a UK-based supernatural podcast hosted by Sarah Powell and her son, Toby. What they've created is less about shock and horror. Rather, it's more about immersion with precisely narrated true life paranormal tales and folklore drawn from ancient hauntings to modern day encounters, all released weekly for your listening dread. I mean, pleasure, right? If you're drawn to podcasts like Scared to Death, the dark paranormal, or real life ghost stories, you're going to find a familiar but distinctly haunting rhythm in the Whispering Woods. So, y'all, dim the lights, settle in, and let their next story whisper its way into your imagination, because out here, even the quietest whisper can leave a shiver. This is the Whispering Woods.
Hello, I'm Sarah.
And I'm Toby.
And this is the Whispering Woods podcast. This episode is all about
South Shields Poltergeist.
Yes, so I've done this in one long narrative. But first of all, if you'd like to support this podcast, you can do so by visiting patreon.com/The Whispering Woods, where for £2.50 you can listen completely ad-free, that's a month. And for £4.50, you can listen completely ad-free, and you also can listen to our Obscurata episodes ad-free too. And on Obscurata, I'm releasing one next week, which is about a demonic possession. And it is actually suitable, it's not violent. There is another one in the same week that is a bit nasty. But this one is suitable, and it's an old one, really interesting story if you want to come over and listen to that. But anyway, we also now on Apple Premium, so you can subscribe. If you listen directly in the app, you can just click, and for $4.99 you get The Whispering Woods and Obscurata ad free. Right, anyway, so one long story, and this is a really good one. And I just want to say as well, it's really nice to have you back though.
Yeah.
Does it feel like a while since you've done this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you ready for the story?
Yes, I am.
In late 2005, a young family in the coastal town of South Shields, England, began experiencing something no family ever anticipates. The couple, in their 20s, and their 3-year-old son live in an ordinary terraced house, leading a typical life. Their home had always been quiet and uneventful. But as the year drew to a close, subtle disturbances started to intrude upon their peace. First it was the little things, a door opening or closing on its own. Chairs found moved from their usual places. Such minor incidents were easy to dismiss as drafts or the house settling, and the parents initially did just that. However, these early signs were only the prelude. What began as puzzling but harmless occurrences would soon escalate into a sustained ordeal of fear, transforming their once cosy home into the site of one of the UK's most terrifying modern hauntings. The first truly unsettling incident struck in December 2005, marking the point where the family could no longer ignore the strange happenings. One evening, the couple returned home to a startling scene. 2 heavy dining chairs stacked one atop the other on the kitchen table, as if placed by an unseen prankster. There were no signs of a break-in. Both parents stood there baffled and uneasy, trying to rationalise how such a thing could happen without human help. In the weeks that followed, more disturbances happened. Doors that had been firmly closed at night were found left wide open, sometimes slamming by themselves in the small hours of the morning. Personal items went missing, only to turn up later in odd places. Once a solid oak chest of drawers was discovered moved out of the bedroom and onto the upstairs landing. A feat of strength that left the couple shaken, wondering what kind of force they were dealing with. Each event chipped away at their skepticism and sense of security. What began as occasional bumps in the night was growing into a pattern of unexplained activity that defied any normal explanation. By Christmas, the atmosphere in the house had changed. An uneasy chill seemed to settle in the air, especially upstairs. Still, the parents tried to maintain a normal holiday for their little boy. On Christmas night, however, their complacency was shattered. As the couple lay in bed in the dark, they suddenly noticed one of their son's plush toys, a stuffed animal, inexplicably appear in the bedroom doorway. Before they could react, the toy launched itself across the room, as if thrown by invisible hands, and struck the mother hard in the face. She cried out in surprise and pain. For a brief moment, both parents sat up in shock, hearts pounding, staring into the darkness, and wondering if they had actually seen what they thought they saw. There was no time to make sense of it. In the next instant, the covers on their bed began to slide as something grabbed their duvet. The couple found themselves in a desperate tug of war, clutching one end of the bedding, while something invisible pulled at the other. The fabric ripped back and forth violently, the pair clinging to it in terror. After a few seconds that felt like an eternity, the struggle abruptly stopped. The phantom assailant let go. For a heartbeat, all was still. Then the husband yelped in pain. He twisted, reaching around to touch his back, shouting that it felt like it was on fire. The wife hurriedly lifted his shirt. Angry red scratch marks began materializing on his bare skin before her eyes. There were 13 distinct scratches gouged into his flesh, swelling and burning. Panicked, the couple watched in horror as each welt rose livid on his skin, evidence of an assault by something invisible. As suddenly as they had appeared, the fiery wounds then faded away by morning. The marks had vanished completely. But the damage was done, not to the body, which healed, but to the family's sense of safety. In the silent aftermath of that Christmas night attack, the young parents were left trembling and awake till dawn, fully aware that their home was under siege by something truly malevolent. That violent nighttime encounter was only the beginning of the terror that would engulf the family. In the new year of 2006, the unexplained activity not only continued, it grew bolder and more bizarre with each passing week. The entity in their home seemed to have a particular fascination with the little boy's toys, turning objects of childhood innocence into instruments of dread. Almost daily, the family would discover scenes that were as grotesque as they were frightening, as if the poltergeist was arranging macabre displays to scare them. One afternoon, the mother walked into the living room and froze. There, hanging from the ceiling fan by its cord, was her son's beloved rocking horse. The wooden toy hung eerily from the overhead light fixture, suspended by its reins tied in a crude noose around its neck. It spun slightly, creaking, as if to ensure its discovery would chill the blood. Gathering her nerve, the mother took it down, her hand shaking. The very next day, an even more menacing tableau greeted them at the top of the stairs. A stuffed rabbit toy had been carefully placed sitting in a child-sized chair on the landing. Laid across the bunny's lap was a sharp box cutter knife, the kind the family kept in a toolbox in the cupboard. The fuzzy rabbit's glassy eyes stared forward, the blade glinting in its paws. It was a scene straight out of a nightmare, an object meant to comfort a child turned into a wordless threat. The implication was clear to the horrified parents. No one in the house was safe. Not even their toddler's beloved toys. These dramatic stunts left the young couple badly shaken. If a force could hoist heavy furniture or tie ropes to hang a rocking horse, what else was it capable of? They began to wonder if the chilling displays were warnings. The parents started fearing that this prankster presence might escalate from symbolic threats to real physical harm. Their fears were soon justified. The unseen intruder indeed proved willing to do more than just frighten. It wanted to hurt and intimidate. Ominous messages started to appear, making the entity's murderous intent explicit. On their son's little magnetic doodle board, a child's toy for drawing, crude words materialized. Phrases like "you're dead" and "die" appeared on the board, shocking the couple. There was no doubt now that whatever force occupied their home had a malicious intelligence behind it. The family's unease turned to full-fledged terror as they realised they were being actively taunted by something paranormal and cruel. As the spring months went on, the malevolent activity in the house only intensified. The entity began to focus its wrath on the family members themselves, both in mind and body. The father in particular became a frequent target for violent physical attacks. Red scratch marks would mysteriously appear on his skin on several occasions, sometimes on his arms or torso, without any visible cause. These injuries often arose in the midst of chaotic disturbances, and were even witnessed and documented by others. On one occasion, a long scratch manifested on his chest, right in front of a visiting investigator, who managed to capture video of the event as it unfolded. The sheer fear and confusion this caused the couple is hard to overstate. How do you protect yourself when the attacker is invisible and can strike at any moment? The father's nerves were frayed by the constant sense of being under siege, never knowing when he might be slashed or hit next. Meanwhile, the poltergeist's disturbing attention also turned increasingly toward the couple's young son. The little boy, barely 3 years old, started experiencing frightening interference that no toddler should ever endure. At night, he would sometimes wake up screaming, as if disturbed by nightmares, or perhaps by something in the room that only he could see. On one terrifying evening, the parents checked the baby monitor and saw that their child was not in his bed at all. Heart-pounding, they rushed into his bedroom to find it empty. A frantic search ensued. They eventually discovered their son in a bizarre state. He was wrapped tightly in his own bed blanket on the floor, with a plastic table flipped over on top of him. The boy appeared to be asleep, but his eyes were wide open and staring vacantly when they found him. It was as though he had been placed there like a doll. On another occasion, the toddler actually vanished from sight inside the house, sending his parents into a panic. They tore through every room calling his name, only to finally locate him tucked into the far end of a downstairs closet, cocooned in a blanket. He was again in an unnaturally deep sleep, with eyes open, completely unresponsive to his parents' cries. These incidents confirmed the parents' worst fears. The entity could physically manipulate their child. The helplessness of finding their baby hidden and trance-like was deeply traumatizing. It was as if the poltergeist was treating the child as a pawn in its cruel game, demonstrating dominion over the most precious member of the household. Emotionally and psychologically, the family was nearing a breaking point. Their home had become a place of constant fear, where each day brought new terrors. The mother was exhausted and jumpy, perpetually on edge, waiting for the next object to fly or the next hateful message to appear. The father, despite trying to put on a brave face, was anxious and sleep-deprived, startled awake by every odd noise or flicker of movement. Both adults felt utterly outmatched by this invisible foe tormenting them. They wondered if they were losing their sanity, or if anyone would even believe the horrors they were witnessing. By mid-2006, after months of enduring the escalating paranormal onslaught alone, the couple realised they could not fight this battle by themselves any longer. Desperate and afraid, they decided to seek outside help. It was time to call in those who might understand the unexplained. They reached out to local paranormal investigators, hoping someone could rid them of the malevolent presence that had turned their lives into a nightmare. In July 2006, help arrived in the form of two experienced ghost researchers, Darren Ritson and Mike Hallowell, investigators from the area who answered the family's plea. Both men had studied hauntings before, but nothing could have prepared them for what they were about to encounter on 42 Lock Street, the now infamous address of the South Shields poltergeist. The investigators were initially cautious and open-minded. Whenever paranormal investigators enter a case, the first task is to rule out any normal explanations or possible hoaxes. Ritson and Hallowell quietly observed the family and their home, looking for signs of trickery or environmental causes. But very quickly, it became apparent that this case was far from ordinary. Instead of hiding when outsiders arrived, as some hauntings are thought to do, whatever lurked in the house seemed eager to make itself known to the new visitors. In fact, having an audience only appeared to encourage the poltergeist. The activity in the house persisted and even grew more theatrical with the investigators present, as if the entity wanted to prove its power under scrutiny. From their very first day on the case, Ritson and Hallowell witnessed phenomena that defied rational explanation. Initially, the men spent hours walking room to room, taking baseline readings and patiently waiting. For a while, all was quiet that summer afternoon. Then, without warning, objects sprang to life. In the little boy's bedroom, the epicenter of so much activity, a yellow plastic toy nut from a children's tool bench suddenly flew through the air at high speed, right in front of the investigators' eyes. It whizzed past them and struck the mother, who was standing nearby on her backside, causing her to yelp in surprise and pain. Both investigators were stunned. They had seen the object materialize from nowhere and rocket across the room. Before they could collect themselves, another small toy on top of a dresser slid off and clattered into a waste bin on the floor, even though no one was near it. Ritson and Hallowell exchanged astonished looks. They now had direct proof that the family's claims of flying toys were true, and this was only the beginning. Over subsequent visits, the paranormal team set up cameras and audio recorders, determined to document everything possible. The entity did not disappoint. They soon collected hundreds of photographs and hours of video footage, capturing uncanny events as they happened. In one instance, after a long overnight vigil, Mike Hallowell awoke from a brief nap in the kitchen to discover a plastic water bottle balanced impossibly on its bottom edge on the table, tilted at a precarious angle that should have immediately toppled it. Intrigued and hoping to debunk it, Mike gently tried to nudge the bottle upright with his finger, but incredibly, it stayed frozen, balanced at a diagonal, as if glued in mid-tip. It took a more forceful push for the bottle to finally fall over, proving it had indeed been somehow fixed in that position in defiance of gravity. The investigators managed to photograph this gravity-defying stunt as evidence. Other examples of the poltergeist's brazen displays were witnessed and recorded firsthand. Small coins materialized out of thin air and pelted the investigators, as if the air itself could turn into a weapon. An ornament, a decorative African figurine, normally kept on a landing shelf, was repeatedly found moved to random spots, including being left halfway down the stairs. During one audio recording session, with the family and investigators all gathered downstairs, the empty bedroom produced an eerie assortment of noises: loud knocks, scraping sounds, the twang of guitar strings, coins spinning on a hard surface, even a bizarre ploop ploop noise echoing in the silence. Reviewing the tape, the team confirmed no one had been upstairs at the time. The room had been completely empty. Each piece of evidence further convinced Ritson and Hallowell that they were dealing with a genuine and exceptionally active poltergeist. Still, in the back of their minds, they considered whether some kind of psychological or unknown entity might be causing the commotion. Was it possible that the family themselves, under extreme stress, were unconsciously producing the phenomena? At first, the investigators thought they might simply be seeing mindless psychic energy on the loose, a classic poltergeist scenario. But the South Shields case would soon prove to have a far more intelligent and sinister character than a typical knock and rattle haunting. One of the most disturbing aspects of the South Shields haunting was the poltergeist's apparent efforts to communicate. Not to convey friendly messages, but to threaten and terrify. It started with those crude scrawlings on the child's doodleboard, but it didn't stop there. To the astonishment of the investigators, menacing words also began appearing on paper and even on the screen of a toy Etch-a-Sketch left in the house. These messages would emerge as if written by an invisible finger, often answering or reacting to things the investigators said out loud. For instance, when challenged or asked to stop, the board might reply with a defiant phrase like, "Go now," or "Stop it now." Direct responses that suggested the presence understood and was reaching to them. Each time a new hateful note appeared, the atmosphere in the house grew heavier with malice. It was clear the entity relished taunting anyone who dared to confront it. Then, in a chilling development that could only happen in a modern haunting, the poltergeist turned to modern tech to deliver its threats. The family's phones became tools of harassment. It started with simple, unexplained calls. The house's landline would ring, and when answered, an automated-sounding voice on the other end would repeat trivial words like, "Hi, hi, hi," on a loop. The first time it happened, the mother assumed it was a prank or glitch, but Ritson recognised the mechanism. Back in 2006, mobile phones could send text messages to landlines, which would then be read out loud by a robotic voice. Somehow, the poltergeist was sending these bizarre landline texts, and incredibly, it was using the family's own phones to do it. In one instance, an incoming "hi, hi" call was traced and found to have been sent from the father's mobile phone, even though that phone was sitting idle on the table in front of everyone at the time. Determined to rule out any trickery, the investigators made everyone place their cell phones on the table and removed the battery and SIM card from the father's phone. Yet even with all personal phones physically disabled and accounted for, the unsettling calls continued. The landline rang again with the robot voice saying, "Hello, hello, sorry," in a mocking tone. It was as if the entity was letting them know that no matter what they did, it could infiltrate their communications at will. Before long, the harassment escalated to direct text messages on the mother's mobile phone. These were not random gibberish, but fully formed threats, and their content was terrifying. One text read, "The will die today." Another hissed, "Going to get you, going to die today." On other occasions, the messages were blunt, "You're dead," or "Die." echoing the same language that had appeared on the doodle board earlier. Each time one of these texts flashed on her phone screen, the mother was overcome with dread. It was like receiving hate mail from a ghost. Investigators verified that these messages could not be traced to any known phone number or sender. They seemed to come from nowhere. The relentless threats took a severe emotional toll. The mother, in particular, was petrified every time her phone buzzed. At one point, Ritson recalls her sitting down in tears, white-faced, clutching the phone in fear as yet another death threat arrived. He and Hallowell did their best to comfort the family, urging them to remember that these were like empty threats meant to intimidate, the poltergeist feeding on their fear or taking perverse pleasure in it. Nevertheless, the psychological torment was very real. The family lived on a knife's edge, never knowing if the next message or manifested object might signal an actual attempt on their lives. Finally, after one especially frightening day of incessant phenomena and taunts, the mother couldn't bear it anymore. She grabbed a few essentials and took her child to stay with her mother elsewhere in town, fleeing the house, at least temporarily, to seek a semblance of safety. Even flight did not offer immediate relief. On her way to her mother's house, her phone continued to buzz with incoming taunts, as if the entity was following her beyond the walls of 42 Lock Street. There was truly no escape from the poltergeist's reach. Up to this point, all of the evidence of the haunting had been indirect. Terrifying, yes, but the culprit remained invisible. That changed when both the family and investigators finally came face to face with the entity responsible. On several occasions, during the height of the activity, witnesses reported seeing a shadowy figure moving through the house. It would appear suddenly in a doorway or at the corner of an eye, a large, black silhouette with vaguely human form. The figure was pitch black and three-dimensional, not a flat shadow cast by light. Those who saw it described an immediate visceral reaction of terror. It exuded an aura of sheer evil, a feeling of dread so profound it raised the hair on the skin. The family and investigators alike sensed that this was no mere harmless ghostly apparition. It felt primitive and evil, as if a being from their worst nightmares had stepped into their reality. Once, the mother encountered the dark figure in the hallway and was paralysed with fright, unable to scream. The father, too, saw it looming in a dim corner of the living room late one night, a tall black mass that disappeared the moment he tried to focus on it. On another occasion, while Ritson and Hallowell were present, the entity manifested briefly at the top of the stairs, allowing all present to glimpse its inhuman silhouette before it melted away into the gloom. These sightings confirmed beyond any doubt that an intelligent presence was at work, not just random poltergeist knocks or objects flying without purpose. The investigators later noted that the encounters with the shadow being convinced them the case involved something beyond a typical poltergeist. It felt as if a sentient, and perhaps demonic, force was orchestrating the phenomena. Unfortunately, the investigators were never able to capture clear video or photo evidence of the shadow figure itself. It was as if the entity chose when and to whom it revealed its form, evading all attempts to document that aspect of the haunting. Nonetheless, its appearance had a profound effect on everyone. After witnessing the black apparition, the parents truly feared that they were dealing with something beyond human, an evil that could potentially do far worse than fling toys or send scary texts. The atmosphere in the house became one of constant dread, a place suffused with the feeling of being watched and hated by an unseen spectator. Still, gathering all their courage, the family and investigators continued to face the entity night after night, determined to see the haunting through and ultimately reclaim the home from this darkness. By late 2006, roughly a year since the haunting began, the poltergeist activity hit a fever pitch. The incidents had grown in frequency and intensity, but there was also a sense that events were building toward some kind of finale. The investigators and the family remained steadfast, refusing to be chased out, and the entity in turn seemed determined to push them to their limits. Some of the most extraordinary and harrowing episodes occurred during the climax phase. On one notable night, the father was attacked yet again in the master bedroom, but this time there were many witnesses present and ready. The investigation team had brought in additional colleagues and observers, including a local journalist and a psychic medium, to witness the phenomenon firsthand. In total, 11 people were inside the house, gathered in a tense vigil when the poltergeist decided to lash out. Without warning, the father doubled over with a shout as red gashes ripped open on his chest and torso, blood beginning to trickle from the fresh wounds. He writhed in pain as those around him watched in astonishment. But this time, instead of just comforting the victim afterwards, the witnesses lifted their cameras. 4 video cameras were rolling, held by different investigators, successfully filming the assault as it happened. For several long seconds, the father's skin visibly cut itself open, adding new scars atop old ones. It was an absolutely chilling sight, yet an incredible piece of evidence. A paranormal attack documented on multiple devices from multiple angles. By the end of the ordeal, the father had been attacked a total of 5 separate times during the case, leaving him with both physical and emotional scars. These extreme demonstrations of violence were the poltergeist's final stand, as if it realised its time might be running out and wanted to leave a lasting impression of terror. As frightening as the physical attacks were, in their aftermath came a strange sense of turning point. Shortly after the multi-witness attack and the flurry of documented phenomena, the activity in the house began to wane. Just as abruptly as it had erupted a year prior, the paranormal storm started to blow itself out. November and December of 2006 saw fewer incidents. The messages stopped, objects ceased moving, and the oppressive atmosphere that hung over the home seemed to lift little by little. By early 2007, the South Shields poltergeist, as it would forever be known, had gone quiet. The nightmare was finally, mercifully over. There were no parting words, no grand finale. One day the family simply realised they had slept through the night undisturbed. And then another day passed peacefully, and another. The evil presence that had terrorised them for months on end had vanished without explanation, leaving the family dazed but overwhelmingly relieved. to have survived one of the most intense hauntings on record. With the haunting concluded, the young family was left to pick up the pieces of their life. They were exhausted and traumatised by what they had endured. Even though the house was now quiet, it no longer felt like home. Every corner was haunted by memories of fear. Not wanting to tempt fate or relive the ordeal, the couple swiftly made a decision. They would not spend another year in that house. They quietly put the property up for sale and moved away from South Shields, aiming for a fresh start in a new location. They did so with little fanfare, maintaining their privacy. Throughout the entire episode, the family had shunned publicity. They never once revealed their names to the press or sought media attention. Even as whispers about their haunted house began to spread through the local community and tabloids, the couple stayed anonymous, declining all requests for interviews. For them, this was never about fame or fortune. It was purely about survival. In their last meeting with the investigators before moving, the mother admitted that while life was slowly returning to normal, the psychological scars remained. She confided that every time she heard an unexplained noise in their new home or misplaced an object, her heart would clench with panic, fearing that the entity had followed them or begun anew. The post-traumatic stress was real, a lingering reminder of the horror they had lived through. It doesn't feel like something you just get over, ever, she said softly, illustrating how deep the haunting's impact was. The investigators, for their part, took time to compile the massive trove of evidence gathered during the case. Darren Ritson and Mike Hallowell went on to co-author a book, The South Shields Poltergeist, One Family's Fight Against an Invisible Intruder, detailing the chronology and their experiences in full. They too were forever changed by the case. Ritson would later reflect that in his decades of paranormal research, he had never encountered a case quite like South Shields. The duration, violence, and interactivity of the phenomena were unprecedented in his experience. We just had something strange happen with the recording, didn't we? Because we were doing it and it just went weird, and that was poltergeist activity for sure.
Yeah.
I'm sat here with an adolescent, you know? But anyway, what did you think of the story?
It's quite weird, that boy hanging down with the knife.
Yeah, that's one bit that I found really scary. And you know, I thought it's not really a poltergeist, is it? It definitely sounds like more like a demonic entity to me.
Well, that toy thingy sounded like something out of Chucky to me.
Yeah, yeah. I just like that poor family going through that. Like, you know, it's just like, imagine, what would you do? Because nobody's going to really believe you, are they? Unless they see it, you know? Imagine that happened here. Nobody believe us lot. They'd be like, you lot are nuts. They think that anyway, so imagine that. Well, I could say it's a good job we got you, because you wouldn't stand for it, would you?
No.
You'd be like, get out. But, I mean, eventually, obviously, they got rid of it, but it's just, yeah, really spooky one, that one. I loved it. I loved it. Did you get any ghosts when you went away?
Nah.
No? It's too bright and shiny for that, wouldn't it? Seeing turtles swimming in the sea and things like that.
That's the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed and we'll catch up with you again soon.
We will indeed. I'll catch up with you on Tuesday if you're tuning in for Obscurata. And then Wednesday for the listener and Reddit story episode. Toby will be back with me on Thursday for the extra. And then we'd start the cycle again. So many episodes. Take care, everyone.
Bye.